All right, woodworkers, today I'm going to teach you one of my favorite things to do, and that's to get a perfect high gloss glass-like reflection from using a stain and polyurethane, right? So we're all woodworkers here. We spend all of this time creating these beautiful products, right? Whether it's furniture, whether it's cutting boards, coasters, you name it. We spend hours slaving over getting the perfect joints, the perfect cuts, everything. So you need to finish it, right? And you need that perfectness. You need that just overall finished product. I don't know what I'm trying to say. You want it to be as good at the end as it was in the middle when you had put it all together, right? So to do that, I'm going to teach you how to do it. I feel like I've perfected this in the years since I started woodworking, and that all started when I started refinishing furniture, and I wanted the tabletops of my nightstands, my dressers, etc. to look brand new, perfect from the store, honestly even better, but I also wanted it to be able to add protection to my piece so that it would last for years to come. And I'm using some furniture that I restored almost 3 years ago in my guest bedroom, and the tabletops still look just as flawless. That's the word I was looking for flawless and shiny and perfect as they did the day I finished them. So this is everything we're going to need to do that. Believe it or not, you don't need a lot to get the perfect finish. You might see online that you need special buffing pads and whatnot, all that. No, you just need your base products. You need your piece, which we're going to use this finished piece of stock here. You need your sanding papers. We'll get to that. You need something to sand with. You need either a stain or a polyurethane, right? You may not want to add a stain, but I'm going to add a stain. So you want a nice oil-based stain and then a polyurethane to go on top of it. You need some mixing sticks. I use foam brushes. You can use a regular paintbrush, but I always toss them because this stuff gets real sticky and stiff when it's dried, and so I don't like cleaning off my paintbrushes. And finally, some rags. So today we're going to finish this piece of pine that I've got. It's just a piece of scrap that I had laying around, and we're going to go ahead and finish this top up here. So I'm going to take you start to finish through sanding it to the perfect level, because that's what this all starts with, right? You need a perfectly smooth surface for this stain and polyurethane to adhere to. You need to sand it down. So I always start with a 120, bump it up to a 220, and then I finish by hand sanding with a 400, and we'll use the 400 later on in the project as well. Now you can use a palm sander if you have one, or just regular sandpaper. Just try to wrap it around a block, sort of like so. I've already got this one conditioned for a 2x4. This one's a little wider than a 2x4. But wrap it around a block, make sure it's nice and tight on all its edges so that you're getting even pressure against the pieces you're sanding. Then we'll start with some mid-wax pre-stain, which I'll have to dig out here. We'll go into our stain, and finally our polyurethane. So let's go ahead and get started with sanding. You're going to see me go and sand with my orbital sander at a 120 here. Then I'm going to bump it to a 220, finally finish with a 400 before we get to the next step. Here we go. All right, guys, and that's it for sanding. So some things I'll note here is that sanding is probably the most critical part of this whole step, right? I mean, that goes almost without saying for anything in life. All the prep work up until the final product, it's going to be critical. So sanding is critical to get that nice, even, flat, and smooth surface for this polyurethane to really sit well on. And so once you've sanded it down to your final desired what's that word that I'm looking for? Grit. There we go. I went to 400. You could even go more, up to like 600. Just get a nice microfiber rag or a shot towel or something like that. Just something that's going to pick up all the excess sawdust real nicely and wipe off the surface of your piece. Now, as I mentioned, you guys saw me, wow, that's just crazy smooth how that gets. You guys saw me start with 120, go to 220, and finally finish with 400. If I was going to be refinishing a piece that it had stain, lacquer, or something like that on it prior, I would have started with a coarser grit. So maybe 60, bump it up to an 80, and then follow on with 120, 220, and 400. If you're going to sand with a palm sander, that only goes in one direction, so not random orbit like an orbit sander does, or you're going to use the wood block method that I use for the 400 grit, always make sure to sand with the grain, right? So back and forth in this direction, not against the grain like this. It'll cause tear out and it won't get you that really smooth surface that I'm feeling right now. Okay, so that was the first step, right? That sanding process. Now we're going to go ahead and be able to apply the stain. I don't have any Minwax pre-stain product like I thought I did. I usually have some at the house, but I must have used it all. It's not critical. I've done several pieces without it, but you can if you'd like. It kind of makes the grain pop, and you know, it aids in that absorption of the stain and preparing the wood for that stain. Now, something that I do want to mention just real quick while I've got it here, and it's good to note, especially if you're restoring old furniture, or maybe you're putting a piece together that just didn't quite fit right and you decided to fill some joints or some cracks or knots like they did in this case with wood filler. So you'll notice that there's wood filler in this piece, and that's that white chalky stuff looking like buried down into the crack that's inside the knot there. That's fine if you do that. It will add strength and fill that gap. However, wood filler does not stain. Even the wood filler that claims to be stainable, honestly, in my opinion, it doesn't stain correctly. It doesn't absorb the color as the rest of your wood does, and that's to be expected, right? Because every wood takes stain differently. That's just my piece on that. So now we can go ahead and stain this. So let me tell you guys the magic secret. I'm not even getting paid to tell you guys this, but I'm going to share it with you anyways from what I've learned in my past 5 years of applying finishes to pieces. Read the directions. Crazy. There it is. I mean, seriously, that's all it is. And I seriously get like glass-like surfaces once my polyurethane is applied. And you'll see the proof what I'm talking about. But so many people just jump right into it and they don't read the directions. So to just back myself here, we're about to apply the stain. I'm going to go ahead and read the directions. All right. Preparation. Remove any existing finishes with sandpaper or liquid stripper. Prepare bare wood for staining by sanding in the direction of the grain. Crazy, just said that. Begin with 120 grit sandpaper and progress through 150 and 180 grits. I go all the way up to 400. Before staining, removing all sand dust, did that with a microfiber rag, dirt, grease, or glue with a vacuum. You can use a vacuum if you've got a big piece, or a clean rag dampened with mineral spirits. That's another way to prep your wood. All right, stain application. When using more than one can, okay, pour all contents together. Okay, we're not doing that. Stir or shake material thoroughly before and occasionally during use. I disagree with that, even though I said read the directions. I only stir. I wouldn't shake. For best results, use a temperature between 60 degrees and 90 degrees. It's 80 out right now. Apply one coat of stain liberally with a brush or clean lint-free rag. We're using a foam brush. Allow to penetrate 2 to 3 minutes, then remove by wiping with a rag in the direction of the grain. Longer penetration times will lead to a darker color. Removal of all excess material is essential, crazy, to ensure proper dry time and proper wood adhesion of the top coat. Let dry for 1 hour. Let longer dry times for damp, humid days. Okay, so those were all the instructions. And I'm reading them verbatim because I'm serious. They're important. A lot of people skip the step where you wipe the excess stain off. That prevents it from getting like sticky, looking darker and denser in some areas as opposed to others. So, and they forget to stir. All of that stain, that material that's in here that makes the liquid the color it is, it settles to the bottom. So that's why you get these stir sticks. They're cheap. You even can get them from free from most of your big box stores, and you're going to mix this. So let's go ahead and jump right into staining. Okay, so you can do this straight on top of your workbench or whatever you're working with, but I'm a diva. I like to keep my workbench the same color I originally stained it, so I laid down some paper. This stuff also helps if you're adding a stain to the top of a piece that's still attached to the furniture that you're staining the top of and you don't want any drip, I usually wrap the bases or the bodies of the furniture in this paper and then just seal it off with green painter's tape, and it'll keep the stain separate from your piece. Go ahead and remove your top. Just set that down. Get to that later. Get a stir stick. Just, move it around for a little bit in there. I'm using Gunstock. I've never used this particular stain before. I've used Varathane Premium Fast Dry. I've always used Minwax stains in the past, but I used this for the first time on the top of my workbench, and I really, really liked it. It dried really fast, and it was just super pretty, and it went on really well. So I'm going to go ahead and dry that off. All right, if you can see this, I don't want to get it on the piece. It doesn't matter. It's really thick down here and really light up there, right? That's because this was contacting the bottom, and that's where all that coloring lies. And so that's why it's important to stir, just so you can see that right there. Okay, I'm going to add my, haven't stained anything. All right, get your paintbrush, foam brush in this case, dip it in. You want to be kind of liberal and always go in the same direction. So those edges real nice. Okay, to be liberal. When you run out, just dab your brush. That's why I like these foam brushes, because they absorb stain or poly as you're dunking it. And just go over a few times like that. Okay? Gosh, that looks real pretty. That's going to look really, really nice when we're done here. All right, and obviously you could do the other edges as well if you were going to do this whole piece, but I'm not. I'm just doing the top today. This is just scrap, and I want to show you what it's going to look like. Put your cap back on. What was I going to say here? Oh, you saw that I had 6 brushes lined up. Oh man, I think I just sprayed stain all over. I did as I was doing that. You got those little dots in there. Okay, so we're letting it sit, right, for 2 to 3 minutes. That's what it said, and then we're going to wipe off the excess. Anyways, you'll notice that I had 6 brushes lined up, right? And you could rewash these foam brushes. I've done that in the past too. But I use a different foam brush for each layer, right? So I'm going to use 1 layer of stain and 5 layers of polyurethane. That might differ from the instructions, but I will explain why I use 5, and we'll go from there. But they're 69 cents a piece, so I think they're pretty cheap to pick up the extras. All right, so this stain has been sitting for about 5 minutes, so we're just going to wipe it off in the direction that we applied it. Boy, yeah, that's pretty. Fold your brush when you're done, or your rag. Come over the middle. You'll see the areas that are still darker than others probably still have some stain on them, so you just want to wipe that off nice and easy like. Yeah, that's a nice, pretty color. Okay, we're going to allow this to dry. I'll give it an hour like the directions said, but what you're looking for is that when you come back with your finger and you stamp it, 1, you don't see a fingerprint left in the top of the wood as you would like ink. That means it's still tacky, but you also don't want any to come off of the wood onto your piece. That means it's not totally dry, and when you go to put the polyurethane on, it'll mix with that polyurethane and it won't give it that high gloss look. It'll kind of give it a muddled or yellowed look. Now, I just want to point this out about that wood filler, like I said, too. So as you can see, that's wood filler right there, probably cheap stuff. It doesn't matter. It's stained real black, right? Because it just absorbs differently than the piece of wood does. So that's why wood filler will always stand out in your piece if you do stain it. Okay, so we've let this wood block here dry. The stain set into this piece nicely, and now we're on to the polyurethane. So if you wanted a darker stain, you could apply more coats of stain, but I've just gone with 1 because I kind of like the lighter look where you can still see the grain really well and the grain definition. So for this polyacrylic Minwax clear gloss, I'm going to read the instructions again because the instructions, right, are so important. So prep, apply, reapply, and dry. So Sand smooth, remove any clear top coat. Stir well, then apply thin coat with high quality brush. After 2 hours, sand lightly and reapply a thin coat. So this one's sort of like the stain, where you want to let it dry for that minimum time, right? The min time is 2 hours, depending on your environmental conditions, and then come back and just give it a touch to make sure that it's not too tacky, right? You want it to be kind of hardened. Not too hardened, because you still want there to be some tackiness in order for the second, third, fourth, and fifth coats to kind of adhere to, almost like an epoxy. Now, I think they only recommend 3 coats. I'm going to go ahead and read through the application here. So surface must be dry and free of wax, grease, polish, old finishes in poor condition, or any foreign matter. Just go over it with a microfiber cloth. Sand to a smooth, uniform surface. Do not use steel wool, right? That would scratch it up. Remove dust with a damp cloth, like I just said, and let dry completely. If desired, apply stain, which we did, to bare wood surface, following label directions. Also did. Wait at least 24 hours before applying polyacrylic finish over min wax wood finish stain, and we've waited at least 24 hours. Stir well before and regularly during use. So regularly during use, if you're applying to a large piece, do not shake. So this one is not like the stain, do not shake. Finish appears milky in can, but dries crystal clear. That's true. Apply a thin coat of polyacrylic finish with a high quality synthetic bristle brush. I use foam brushes, it'll be okay. Apply in the direction of the wood grain, so left to right. Do not overbrush. Let dry at least 2 hours, then sand with a very fine sandpaper. 220 grit is recommended. We'll use 400 to ensure an even finish and proper adhesion of additional coats. Do not use steel wool and remove all dust. You'll see that in the next step. Apply a second coat for additional coats. Repeat step 6 before applying. 3 coats are recommended. I recommend 5 to get that nice thick coat of protection that'll last years, and also to get the kind of premium shine. After final coat, allow 3 hours before light handling and 24 hours before normal use. So we've got our polyacrylic. We'll go ahead and open it up. I'm going to use the reverse side of the stir stick that we use for the stain. That's well and dried after 24 hours, so no worries about it dripping into the can. And you'll see, as kind of described, it does look, if you can see that without spilling, super milky, but that's okay. It applies in that kind of crystal clear look. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a good stir, stirring for 2 to 3 minutes. Kind of scrape the edges. Okay, let the excess drip back into the can. Good to go. Place that to the side. All right, get a new foam brush. We're going to dip, get a nice amount on there. You can always add more, so I kind of scrape some off on the lip, and then just in the direction of the grain. It goes on with kind of a blue sheen. It's real easy, and when you get dry, just flip the brush over, so I need more. Want to get even coverage over the whole piece. Okay, it's a nice thin coat, got some bubbles in there, that's okay. Those will kind of float out, and I clean up the edges always just a little bit there. We'll let that dry for 3 to 4 hours as recommended. I just set a timer so that I'm coming back kind of on time, and then we'll come back and sand. There we go. Okay, so that's the first coat. It'll dry into almost like a satin finish. That's okay. Trust the process. We'll be back in 4 hours. Okay, guys, so we're back 4 hours later, and if we touch it, it's dry, so that's good, right? We're testing for that tackiness, and like I said, with that first top coat, we've got that little bit of satin look to it, so not the clear gloss, which is why you need multiple coats. Now, what I've gone ahead and done was I got a piece of 400 grit sandpaper and one of my foam sanding blocks, and all you do is just wrap your sanding paper around. You do this to get even pressure on the piece, right? That's the reason behind it. So wrap that in there, make sure it's good and tight, and then trust me here, biggest part of this whole process is just trust me. What is it? Believe me now, thank me later. It's gonna look worse before it gets better. So very lightly, ensuring we get that consistent pressure. We're just gonna lightly pass this over the top in the direction of the grain once or twice. So I'm gonna go ahead and go this way with it because I can cover the whole piece. But if not, just do a little bit of overlapping. It doesn't need to be hardly any pressure at all. And one more. Okay, see a little bit of fine dust on that sanding block. And then go ahead and take a nice microfiber rag or a cloth and just wipe it off, right? So what you're doing is you're sanding out any bubbles that were left from the first coat or subsequent coat as we go along through this. So we put one coat on, we're about to put another coat on, so go ahead and take out your polyurethane one more time here. Okay, and the reason I say trust the process here is because you won't really notice it this first go round, but you'll definitely notice it. I'm going to go ahead and do that with that piece. You'll definitely notice it moving forward as we get to the second, third, and even fourth coats, that when you go to sand, you'll feel like you're leaving streaks, white streaks in the piece. But just trust me, that microfiber cloth is going to get rid of a lot of them, and it's necessary for the process. I don't really know what I'm saying. It's late right now because to do this consistently every 4 hours, you kind of have to get up in the middle of the night to take care of it. So just, plan accordingly with your project. It would be best to start this process early in the morning on like a weekend when you can attend to it like every 4 hours or so instead of having to do it. I inevitably do every time, since this is 5 o'clock woodshop after all, right? And everything's after 5 o'clock after the workday, getting up through the night to take care of this. But go ahead and just be, generous enough. Get it over in the direction of the grain. Overlap your streaks. Call it good and clean up your edge. Try not to leave any brush strokes, and you don't want to keep going over and over, especially with the foam brush. That is one disadvantage using the foam brush. You'll start to kind of, where it dries out, you'll start to pick up some of the finish that you've applied. So go ahead and set your brush down, get your poly back, and then close that up. There we go. Okay, and we're good for another 4 hours. So I'll be back here in 3 to 4 hours, and we'll go ahead and put the third coat on. All right, coat number 3. So again, sandpaper wrapped around your foam block. A few times, you'll start to see the dust coming off. Wipe it away. Polyurethane. Okay, so fourth coat, and I just want to show you guys that with 3 coats, we already have that really nice sheen on it. And if you remember from the instructions, that's what the polyurethane actually called for, was just 3 coats. But I add the extra 2. I feel it gives it a little bit of an extra sheen, but it also adds just an even better and stronger, thicker layer of protection. So, you know, if you're doing a tabletop or a nightstand or something like that that's going to get a lot of use, a coffee table, you know, those sorts of things, then I think 5 coats is worth it. And I almost forgot to sand in between coats. I was talking. Okay, so there's the 4th coat. We'll let that dry, and we'll come back and add the 5th. And again, guys, just so you know, you're tracking, you could do just 3, and you would be totally fine. But again, I always go for 5. So 3 works as recommended on the instructions on the mix, but keep watching to see what 5 looks like at the very end. All right, team, so we're on to the final application of stain here. Really nice so far, happy with how it's turning out, and we're just going to go ahead and sand it down one more time with that 400 grit sandpaper. It's always awkward to do this. You don't really want to go back and forth. You just want to give it some nice, clean, even swipes and take off that dust. Clean up the edges there. And we're good to go. 5th and final coat. We'll let that dry for 3 to 4 hours and then come back and it should be complete. All right, guys, and just like that, we are done with this top coat polyurethane clear gloss finish. It really is just that easy. It just requires you to have the proper materials, follow the instructions, and have patience, right? Give it that time, allow the layers to set and dry, sand smooth, and then you end up with this beautiful clear gloss glass-like surface that I like to say is my signature touch on finishing products. And, you know, just so you believe me, check the way this thing catches the light as I kind of rotate it around. And I'll go ahead and put another camera angle on it as well. But I mean, it came out super, super nice. I love the color of the stain. The polyurethane is real shiny, real flat, and just overall a great finish that'll last for years to come because we use those 5 layers instead of the 3. So that's my advice and how I do top coat polyurethane finishes. I really believe that anybody can do it with just the proper care and attention. And I hope you learned something from this video and took something away. If you'd like me to see, or if you'd like to see me apply any other type of top coat to a piece to see how I would do it and how it would turn out, satin, flat, matte, all of those things, I'm totally willing to do it. And I'll even consider, I think, making a video on a spray-on polyurethane versus a brush-on like this one here, because I think the brush-on is such a better finish and leaves such a better result, especially one for protecting your piece as opposed to just making it look nice. So this has been 5 o'clock Woodshop. Please, guys, consider subscribing, and sharing this video. The support means so much to me. We've grown so much in the last month and a half, and it's just awesome to see, and awesome to see this little community of you know, amateur hobbyist woodworkers where we can all just grow together and learn from my mistakes so that you guys can go out and make awesome products of your own.